Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. I adjusted my tie for what felt like the 100th time, studying my reflection in the mirror. The knot still looked crooked. Benjamin, hurry up. We're going to be late, Hazel called from the bathroom, her voice tinged with impatience. I sighed, giving the tie one last tug before turning away from the mirror. Coming, dear. Hazel emerged, looking stunning in her dark blue dress. She barely glanced at me as she grabbed her purse from the bed. How do I look? I asked, forcing a smile. She gave me a once-over, her eyes cold. Fine, let's go. As we drove to the wedding venue, an uneasy silence filled the car. Hazel kept checking her phone, thumbs flying over the screen. Everything okay? I ventured. Just work stuff, she muttered, not looking up. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, pushing down the nagging feeling in my gut. This was Lawrence's big day. My best friend from college was finally tying the knot, and I was determined to be happy for him. We arrived at the picturesque country club just as other guests were filing in. I spotted Lawrence near the entrance, looking dapper in his tuxedo. Ben, he exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. God, it's good to see you, man. I clapped him on the back, grinning. Wouldn't miss it for the world. You ready for this? Lawrence's eyes sparkled with excitement. More than ready. She's just amazing, Ben. I can't believe how lucky I am. I felt a pang in my chest, remembering when Hazel and I had felt that way. I pushed the thought aside. I'm happy for you, buddy. Really. As we chatted, I noticed Hazel had wandered off. I scanned the crowd, finally spotting her near the bar, engrossed in conversation with Chad McMillan, Lawrence's best man. Something about the way they were standing, heads bent close together, made my skin prickle. The ceremony was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, and Lawrence's voice cracked with emotion as he recited his vows. I glanced at Hazel, hoping to share a moment of nostalgia, but her attention was fixed on her phone, hidden in her lap. At the reception, I lost track of Hazel again. I mingled with old college friends, but my mind kept wandering. Where was she? You look like you could use this, a voice said, and I turned to see a petite brunette holding out a glass of champagne. Thanks, I said, accepting the drink. I'm Benjamin. Cindy, she replied with a warm smile. Lawrence's cousin. You must be the famous college roommate I've heard so much about. We fell into easy conversation, and I found myself relaxing for the first time that day. Cindy was sharp and funny, with a keen eye for detail. So, she said after a while, her tone casual. Where's your wife? Hazel, right? I scanned the room again, feeling a familiar knot of unease. Good question. She keeps disappearing on me. Cindy's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, that's interesting. Something in her voice made me look at her more closely. What do you mean? She hesitated, then leaned in closer. Look, it's probably nothing, but I couldn't help noticing earlier. Your wife seemed pretty cozy with the best man. Chad, I think his name is? The knot in my stomach tightened. Chad McMillan, I said, my voice flat. Yeah, I know him. Cindy must have sensed my discomfort because she quickly changed the subject, but her words had planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't shake. As the night wore on, Hazel's absences became more noticeable. Each time she reappeared, her excuses grew flimsier. Sorry, had to take a work call, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. In the middle of a wedding reception? I countered. She shrugged, already turning away. You know how it is. But I didn't know. Not anymore. I found myself at the bar, nursing a whiskey, when one of the groomsmen stumbled up beside me. His bow tie was askew, and he reeked of alcohol. Hey man, he slurred. You're Hazel's husband, right? I nodded, suddenly alert. Yeah, that's right. Have you seen her? He grinned, the expression almost leering. Oh yeah, I've seen her. With Chad. They headed downstairs a while ago. Looked like they didn't want to be followed, if you know what I mean. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? But the groomsman was already wandering away, distracted by a passing tray of hors d'oeuvres. I set my glass down with a thud and stood up. Enough was enough. It was time to find out what the hell was going on. The basement corridor was dim and quiet, a stark contrast to the lively reception above. My footsteps echoed on the polished floor as I made my way down the hall, listening for any sign of Hazel. Then I heard it, muffled laughter, coming from behind a door marked private. My heart pounding, I approached the door. Part of me wanted to turn back, to pretend I'd never come down here. But I couldn't. I had to know. I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Hazel was there, on her knees in front of Chad. Two other men I recognized as groomsmen, Stephen and Daniel, stood nearby, grinning like they were watching a show. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Hazel looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and she laughed. "Oh, babe," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "You're just in time to see how things should be done." Chad leaned back against the wall, a smug smile on his face. "Hey there, Benny boy. Enjoying the view?" Stephen chuckled. "He's lucky. Too bad he can't handle you like we can, Hazel." Something snapped inside me. The shock and hurt crystallized into white-hot rage. Without thinking, I pulled out my phone and hit the live stream button. "This is what my marriage has come to," I said, my voice steady despite the fury coursing through me. "Everyone gets to see the real Hazel now." Hazel's eyes widened as she realized what I was doing. "Ben, don't you dare." But I was beyond caring about her wishes. Years of pent-up frustration and suspicion poured out of me as I ranted into the camera, exposing every lie, every betrayal. Chad lunged for my phone, but I was quicker. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor. "You son of a bitch," I snarled. "You think you can just take whatever you want?" Stephen and Daniel tried to grab me, but adrenaline coursed through my veins. I fought them off, my vision blurred with rage. Hazel was still laughing, the sound hysterical now. "Oh, Ben," she taunted. "Did you really think you were enough for me? Poor, pathetic Ben." Her words only fueled my anger. I turned the camera on her. "Tell them, Hazel. Tell everyone watching how long you've been lying to me." Chaos erupted around us. I could hear shouting from upstairs, footsteps thundering down the hall. The door burst open, security guards pouring in. As they pulled me away, I caught a glimpse of Hazel's face. For the first time, she looked scared. Good, I thought. Let her be afraid. This was just the beginning. The next few hours passed in a blur. Security escorted me out of the venue, but not before I caught a glimpse of the chaos unfolding upstairs. Guests were huddled around their phones, watching the live stream with shocked expressions. Lawrence was in Chad's face, shouting about ruining his wedding. I should have felt guilty about that, but I didn't. All I felt was a cold, hard satisfaction. I ended up at a nearby bar, nursing a whiskey and watching the fallout unfold on social media. The video had gone viral within minutes. Hashtag Wedding from Hell was trending, with people dissecting every second of the footage. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages and calls, but I ignored them all. What was there to say? "Is this seat taken?" I looked up to see Cindy standing there, concern etched on her face. I gestured for her to sit. "I saw what happened," she said softly. "I'm so sorry, Benjamin." I laughed bitterly. "Don't be. I'm the idiot who didn't see it coming." Cindy's eyes flashed. "No, you're not an idiot. You're a victim of manipulation and betrayal." "Tell that to the internet," I muttered, showing her my phone. Already, there were posts questioning my mental state, calling me unstable and abusive for exposing Hazel like that. "This is bullshit," Cindy said, her voice hard. "They're trying to control the narrative. We can't let them." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "We?" She nodded, a determined glint in her eye. "I'm a divorce lawyer, Benjamin. I've seen cases like this before. What Hazel and Chad did, it's despicable, and I want to help you fight back." Before I could respond, the bar's door burst open. Hazel stormed in, Chad close behind her. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled. "You bastard," she hissed, marching up to our table. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood up slowly, facing her. I exposed the truth, something you clearly aren't familiar with. Chad stepped forward, his jaw already bruising where I'd hit him. "You're going to pay for this, Benjamin. I'll sue you for everything you've got." I laughed in his face. Go ahead. I've got nothing left to lose. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that, Hazel sneered. Your job, your reputation. By the time we're done with you, you'll wish you'd never been born. Is that a threat? Cindy interjected, standing up beside me. Hazel's eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you? I'm Benjamin's lawyer, Cindy said coolly, and I'd advise you both to leave before you say something you'll regret. Chad scoffed. You think you can intimidate me? Do you know who I am? A cheating scumbag who just got caught with his pants down on camera? I suggested. Yeah, I think we all know exactly who you are now. For a moment, I thought Chad might take a swing at me, but Hazel grabbed his arm, pulling him back. This isn't over, she spat. As they stormed out, I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Thank you, I said to Cindy. You didn't have to do that. She smiled. Oh, I think I did. Now, let's talk strategy. They're going to come at you hard, and we need to be prepared. We spent the next few hours going over my options. Cindy was a godsend, breaking down the legal implications and helping me see through the fog of anger and hurt. It was past midnight when I finally checked my phone again. Among the flood of messages was one from Hazel. Ben, please. We need to talk. What happened? It's not what you think. I can explain everything. Just give me a chance. I showed the message to Cindy, who frowned. Classic manipulation tactic. She's trying to make you doubt yourself. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. I know, but it's not going to work. Not anymore. As I typed out a response, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, raw and bleeding, but alongside it was something new. Determination, resolve. Hazel had underestimated me. They all had. But that was their mistake, and I was going to make damn sure they regretted it. The harsh light of morning did nothing to soften the reality of my situation. I woke up on a lumpy couch in my friend Mike's apartment, my head pounding from too much whiskey and too little sleep. Mike was already up, watching the news with a grim expression. My face was plastered across the screen, alongside Hazel's and Chad's. The ticker at the bottom read, Wedding Scandal Rocks Local Community. Teacher exposed cheating wife on live stream. You're famous, buddy, Mike said, handing me a cup of coffee. I grunted, taking a long sip. Not exactly the kind of fame I was going for. My phone buzzed. Another message from Hazel. Benjamin, please. You're not thinking clearly. What you did, it was cruel and unnecessary. We can still fix this if you just talk to me. I showed Mike the message, my jaw clenching. Can you believe her? She's trying to make me the bad guy. Mike shook his head. Classic gaslighting, man. Don't fall for it. I wasn't planning to. The Benjamin who might have believed her lies, who might have given her another chance, died the moment I opened that bathroom door. There was a knock at the door. Mike answered it, then called out to me. Ben, there's someone here to see you. I walked into the hallway to find Cindy standing there, looking fresh and determined despite the early hour. Good morning, Benjamin. Are you ready to start fighting back? Over the next few hours, Cindy and I mapped out our strategy. We knew Hazel and Chad would try to spin the story, to paint me as the villain. We had to get ahead of it. We need to control the narrative, Cindy explained. Right now, people are seeing snippets of what happened. We need to give them the full picture. I nodded, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since the wedding. What do you suggest? An interview, she said. We'll reach out to a respected journalist, someone who won't sensationalize the story. You'll tell your side, lay out the facts. No emotional outbursts, no name-calling. Just the truth. It was a solid plan. But as we worked on crafting my statement, my phone kept buzzing with messages. Not just from Hazel now, but from colleagues, students' parents, even Lawrence. One message from Lawrence caught my eye. Ben, what the hell happened? Chad saying you attacked him unprovoked. Sarah's in tears. This was supposed to be our day, man. The guilt I'd been suppressing surged up. I showed the message to Cindy. I ruined their wedding, I said, my voice hollow. Cindy's eyes softened. No, Benjamin. Hazel and Chad ruined the wedding. You just exposed the truth. She was right, I knew. But it didn't make it any easier. As the day wore on, the story continued to evolve. Chad had given a press conference, portraying himself as the victim of a deranged, jealous husband. Hazel was nowhere to be seen, but her silence spoke volumes. By evening, I was emotionally drained. Cindy had left to start arranging the interview, and Mike had gone out to grab us some food. I was alone with my thoughts for the first time since everything had imploded. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. I looked older, somehow, harder. The man staring back at me wasn't the same one who had cheerfully adjusted his tie yesterday morning. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Hazel. I'm coming over. We need to talk face to face. This has gone too far, Benjamin. I stared at the message, a cold fury building inside me. How does she? After everything she'd done, she thought she could just come over and what? Explain it all away? I typed out a response, my fingers flying over the keys. Don't bother. There's nothing left to say. You made your choice, Hazel. Now you get to live with it. I hit send, then blocked her number. It felt final, like slamming a door shut. As I set the phone down, I caught my reflection again. This time, I saw something different in my eyes. Determination. Strength. Hazel had underestimated me. They all had. But that was about to change. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I tensed, half expecting to see Hazel standing there despite my warning. Instead, I found Christy, Chad's ex-fiancée, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. Benjamin, she said, her voice trembling. I saw the video. I had to come. I ushered her inside, curiosity overriding my caution. Christy, what are you doing here? She collapsed onto the couch, wringing her hands. I couldn't stay away. Not after seeing what they did to you. It's the same thing they did to me. My eyebrows shot up. What do you mean? Christy's story poured out of her in a rush. She and Chad had been engaged, but he'd left her for Hazel. It wasn't just a simple affair, though. They had systematically manipulated her, gaslighting her until she doubted her own sanity. I thought I was going crazy, Christy said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chad would tell me one thing, then deny ever saying it. Hazel. She pretended to be my friend, all while sleeping with him behind my back. The pieces started falling into place. The subtle digs, the inexplicable mood swings, the constant feeling that I was missing something obvious. It hadn't just been an affair. It had been a game to them. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my mind racing. Christy's eyes met mine, a spark of determination shining through her tears. Because I want to help you take them down. They can't keep doing this to people, Benjamin. We have to stop them. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Cindy. Interview set for tomorrow morning. Are you ready? I looked at Christy, then back at the phone. A plan was forming in my mind. One that would expose Hazel and Chad for who they truly were. Yeah, I replied to Cindy. I'm ready. And I think I just got us a star witness. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Cindy arrived early, her face lighting up when she saw Christy. This is perfect, she said after hearing Christy's story. It establishes a pattern of behavior. They can't dismiss both of you as crazy or jealous. As we prepared for the interview, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about justice, about protecting others from falling victim to Hazel and Chad's manipulations. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca, arrived right on time. As the camera crew set up, she pulled me aside. You want to do this? She asked, her voice low. Once we air this, it won't stop. I met her gaze steadily. The truth needs to come out. The interview was grueling. Rebecca pulled no punches, asking pointed questions about my marriage, about the night of the wedding, about my decision to live stream the confrontation. Some people are calling your actions extreme, she said. How do you respond to that? I leaned forward, my voice firm. I understand why it might seem that way. But you have to understand, this wasn't just about catching my wife cheating. This was about exposing a pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse that had been going on for years. That's when we brought in Christy. Her testimony was powerful, corroborating everything I'd said about Hazel and Chad's tactics. They enjoy it, Christy said, her voice shaking but determined. The lying, the gaslighting, it's all a game to them. And they don't care who gets hurt in the process. As the interview wrapped up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time since the wedding, I felt like I was back in control. But the fight was far from over. As we were packing up, my phone exploded with notifications. Hazel had finally broken her silence, posting a lengthy statement on social media. Benjamin's actions are those of a controlling, abusive husband, it read. I admit to my mistakes, but his reaction was extreme and dangerous. I fear for my safety and the safety of those around him. The rage I'd been holding back threatened to overwhelm me, but Cindy's hand on my arm steadied me. This is good, she said, her eyes gleaming. She's desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Hazel thought she could manipulate public opinion like she'd manipulated me, but she was wrong. This time, I was ready for her games, and I was going to win. As night fell, I found myself back at Mike's apartment, surrounded by a small group of unexpected allies. Mike, Cindy, Christy, and even Lawrence, who had reached out after seeing the interview. I'm sorry, man, Lawrence said, clapping me on the shoulder. I should have known better than to believe Chad's bullshit. I nodded, accepting his apology. It's not your fault. They fooled a lot of people. We spent hours strategizing, poring over every detail of Hazel and Chad's lives that Christy and I could remember. Patterns emerged, connections we'd never noticed before. It's not just about the affairs, Cindy mused, her legal mind working overtime. It's about power, control. They get off on manipulating people. But why? Mike asked, frowning. What do they get out of it? I thought about it, remembering the look in Hazel's eyes when she realized I was live streaming. The panic, yes, but also excitement? It's a rush for them, I said slowly. The thrill of getting away with it, of being smarter than everyone else. Christy nodded, her face pale. Chad always said he was destined for greatness, that the rules didn't apply to people like him. A chill ran down my spine as the full picture came into focus. This wasn't just about my marriage. It was about stopping two people who thought they were above the law, above basic human decency. As the others continued talking, I stepped out onto the balcony, needing a moment alone. The city sprawled out before me, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Hazel and Chad were probably plotting their next move. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it, my jaw clenching as I read. You have no idea what you're up against, Benjamin. Back off now, or you'll regret it. See. I stared at the message, a cold smile spreading across my face. Chad thought he could intimidate me? He had no idea who he was dealing with. I typed out a reply, game on. As I hit send, I felt the last traces of the old Benjamin, the trusting, naive man I'd been fall away. In his place stood someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be fooled again. Hazel and Chad had started this war, but I was going to finish it. Weeks had passed since the wedding, but the chaos it unleashed showed no signs of abating. I sat in Cindy's office, staring at the stack of legal documents before me. Hazel's divorce filing painted me as a monster, a controlling and abusive husband who had finally snapped. This is bullshit, I growled, slamming the papers down on Cindy's desk. Cindy nodded, her eyes sharp. I know, Benjamin, but we need to stay calm and strategic. Hazel and Chad are playing dirty, but we can beat them at their own game. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. What's our next move? We counter their narrative, Cindy said, leaning forward. They're painting you as unstable. We need to show the world who the real manipulators are. Just then, Cindy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her eyebrows rising. It's Marcos. He's found something. Marcos Morton, Cindy's private investigator friend, had been digging into Hazel and Chad's lives for weeks. I leaned in, eager for any ammunition we could use. Cindy put the phone on speaker. Go ahead, Marcos. You're on with Benjamin and me. You're not going to believe this, Marcos's gruff voice came through. I've been tracking their financial records, and there's a pattern. They're not just having an affair. They've been systematically manipulating people for years. My fists clenched. What do you mean? It's subtle, Marcos explained. No outright illegal activity, but they've been using their relationships to climb social and professional ladders. Hazel's been playing the devoted wife to gain trust in your social circles, while Chad's been leveraging his charm for political connections. Son of a bitch, I muttered. Cindy's eyes gleamed. This is exactly what we need. Marcos, can you get us concrete evidence? Already on it, Marcos replied. I'll have a full report for you by tomorrow. As Cindy ended the call, I stood up, pacing the office. We need to expose them. Show everyone what they really are. Cindy nodded, her expression determined. We will, Benjamin, but we need to be smart about this. They've already got the media on their side. One wrong move, and we'll play right into their hands. I stopped pacing, turning to face her. So what do we do? We build our case, Cindy said firmly. Gather every piece of evidence, every witness we can find. And then, when the time is right, we strike. I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. Hazel and Chad thought they had me beaten, but they had no idea what was coming. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my principal. Benjamin, we need to talk. Come to my office tomorrow morning. I showed Cindy the message, my stomach sinking. They're putting me on administrative leave, aren't they? Cindy's expression softened. Probably. But don't worry, we'll fight this too. Your job, your reputation, we'll get it all back. As I left Cindy's office, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Hazel and Chad had taken everything from me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. And this time, I was going to win. The next morning, I stood outside Principal Anderson's office, my heart pounding. I knew what was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. Come in, Benjamin, Anderson called. I entered, noting the tension in Anderson's posture. He gestured for me to sit. Benjamin, he began, his voice strained. I'm sure you understand why I've called you here. I met his gaze steadily. You're putting me on leave. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. I'm afraid we have no choice. The publicity, the accusations. We need to conduct a full investigation. And my side of the story doesn't matter? I asked, my voice hard. Anderson sighed. Of course it matters. But we have a responsibility to our students, to their parents. Until this is resolved, we can't risk. Risk what? I interrupted. Having a teacher who stood up to manipulation and betrayal? Benjamin, Anderson said, his tone warning. I'm trying to help you here. Take the leave. Clear your name. Then we can talk about your return. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Fine. But know this, when the truth comes out, and it will, I expect a full apology and reinstatement. As I stormed out of the office, I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me. Whispers followed me down the hallway, but I held my head high. They could gossip all they wanted. I knew the truth, and soon, everyone else would too. Back at my apartment, I paced restlessly. The walls felt like they were closing in. Everything I'd worked for, my career, my reputation, it was all slipping away. And for what? Because I'd exposed the truth? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Tough break, Benny. Should have kept your mouth shut. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll find a new career. Maybe as a wedding videographer? I didn't need to ask who it was from. I could practically hear Chad's smug voice through the screen. My grip tightened on the phone, rage boiling up inside me. Another buzz. This time, it was Cindy. Just heard about the school. Don't let it get to you. We're making progress. Meet me at the office in an hour. Marcos has the report. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Chad wanted me to lose control, to give him more ammunition, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. An hour later, I was back in Cindy's office. Marcos was there too, a thick folder in his hands. All right, Cindy said, her voice all business. What have you got for us, Marcos? Marcos opened the folder, spreading out documents across Cindy's desk. It's all here. Financial records, testimonies from former associates, even some encrypted emails I managed to recover. I leaned in, scanning the documents. What am I looking at? A pattern, Marcos explained. Hazel and Chad, they're not just cheaters. They're social climbers, manipulators. They use people, discard them, and move on to the next target. Cindy picked up one of the papers, her eyes widening. This is impressive work, Marcos. And disturbing. I looked from Cindy to Marcos. So what does this mean for us? Cindy's eyes gleamed. It means we have a case. Not just for your divorce, Benjamin, but potentially for a civil suit. Emotional distress, damage to reputation. I don't care about money, I interrupted. I want justice. I want everyone to see them for who they really are. Marcos nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, kid. And with this evidence, we can make that happen. As we pored over the documents, a plan began to take shape. It wasn't just about my divorce anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of manipulation and deceit that had affected countless lives. By the time I left Cindy's office that evening, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Hazel and Chad thought they had one, that they had beaten me down, but they had no idea what was coming. The community center was bustling with activity as I made my way to the small conference room at the back. A sign on the door read, Healing Hearts, Support Group for Infidelity Survivors. I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the doorknob. Was I really ready for this? But I knew I needed this. Needed to be around people who understood, who had been through the same hell I was going through. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was set up in a circle of chairs, about a dozen people already seated. A woman with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair stood up as I entered. Welcome, she said warmly. I'm Laverne. You must be Benjamin. I nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious. That's me. Laverne gestured to an empty chair. Please join us. We're just about to start. As I took my seat, I couldn't help but scan the faces around me. Some looked defeated, others angry. All bore the unmistakable marks of betrayal. All right, everyone, Laverne began. We have a new member joining us today. Benjamin, would you like to introduce yourself? I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm Benjamin. I'm here because, well, I guess you all know why I'm here. A few sympathetic nods around the circle. My wife cheated on me, I continued, the words still bitter in my mouth, at my best friend's wedding, and then had the audacity to paint me as the bad guy when I exposed her. That's rough, man, a guy across from me said. I'm Dave. My ex, she did something similar. Gaslight me for months before I caught her. As the session progressed, I found myself opening up more than I expected. There was something cathartic about sharing my story with people who truly understood. But one person in particular caught my attention. A well-dressed man in his late 40s who introduced himself as Simon Whitaker. Benjamin, Simon said as the session was wrapping up, your story, it resonates with me. I've been where you are. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Simon nodded. My ex-wife, she was a master manipulator. Turned my whole world upside down. But I fought back and I won. There was something in Simon's confident demeanor that drew me in. How did you do it? Simon smiled. Let's grab a coffee. I'd like to help you, if you'll let me. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. As we left the community center, I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter might be a turning point. Over coffee, Simon shared his story. It was eerily similar to mine, right down to the public humiliation and legal battles. The key, Simon said, leaning in, is to fight fire with fire. You can't play nice with people like this. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty. I frowned. What do you mean? Simon's eyes gleamed. I'm talking about using every resource at your disposal. Your lawyer sounds good, but legal battles are expensive. I'd be willing to help finance your fight. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? Why would you do that? Because I've been there, Simon said simply. And because people like your ex-wife and her lover, they need to be stopped. Think about it, Benjamin. How many other lives will they destroy if someone doesn't stand up to them? As I left the coffee shop, my mind was reeling. Simon's offer was tempting, but something about it felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but years of teaching had honed my instincts for when someone wasn't being entirely truthful. Lost in thought, I almost didn't notice the woman watching me from across the street. But as I turned to head home, I caught a glimpse of her. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. My phone buzzed. A text from Cindy. How was the support group? Any promising contacts? I hesitated, then replied, maybe. Met a guy named Simon Whitaker. Offered to help finance the legal battle. Seems too good to be true. Cindy's response was immediate. Don't commit to anything. I'll have Marcos look into him. As I pocketed my phone, I glanced back to where I'd seen the woman. She was gone, but the uneasy feeling remained. Back at my apartment, I tried to relax, but my mind kept racing. Simon's offer, the mysterious woman, the looming legal battle. It all swirled together in a confusing mess. A knock at the door startled me out of my thoughts. I opened it to find Christy, Chad's ex-fiancée, standing there. Christy? I said, surprised. What are you doing here? Her eyes were wild, her hair disheveled. Benjamin, we need to talk. It's about Chad and Hazel. There's so much you don't know. I hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside to let her in. As Christy rushed past me, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. All right, I said, closing the door. Start from the beginning. Christy paced my living room, her words tumbling out in a rush. They're not just cheaters, Benjamin. They're predators. They find people, use them, and then discard them when they're no longer useful. I sank into a chair, my mind racing. What do you mean, use them? Christy stopped pacing, fixing me with an intense stare. For power, for connections, for their own sick amusement. Chad, he's got political ambitions. He uses people to climb the ladder. And Hazel, she gets off on the emotional destruction she leaves behind. My fists clenched. How do you know all this? Because I've been tracking them, Christy admitted. Ever since Chad left me for Hazel. I couldn't just let it go. I had to understand why, had to make sense of it all. I leaned forward. Christy, this is important. Do you have proof? Anything we can use? She nodded, reaching into her bag and pulling out a flash drive. It's all here. Emails, financial records, testimonies from other victims. I've been gathering evidence for months. I took the flash drive, turning it over in my hands. This could be the key to everything. The smoking gun we needed to bring Hazel and Chad down. Why are you giving this to me? I asked, looking up at Christy. Her eyes filled with tears. Because you're the first person who's had the courage to stand up to them publicly. And because I'm tired, Benjamin. Tired of letting them win. I stood up, placing a hand on Christy's shoulder. They won't win. Not anymore. We're going to stop them, Christy. Together. As Christy left, I immediately called Cindy. Cindy, you're not going to believe this. We've got a breakthrough. What kind of breakthrough? Cindy asked, her voice cautious but intrigued. I explained about Christy's visit and the flash drive. This could be everything we need, I finished. Don't get ahead of yourself, Cindy warned. We need to verify everything on that drive. But if it checks out, Benjamin, this could change everything. As I ended the call, I felt a surge of hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Hazel and Chad had played their games for too long. But now, finally, we had a chance to beat them at their own game. I sat in Cindy's office, my head in my hands. The evidence from Christie's flash drive had checked out, giving us a wealth of ammunition against Hazel and Chad. But now, we had a new problem. I can't believe it, I muttered. Simon. I actually trusted him. Cindy's face was grim as she paced the office. Marcos's report is conclusive. Simon Whitaker has been working for Chad this whole time. He's been playing both sides, feeding information back to Chad while pretending to help you. I slammed my fist on the desk, causing Cindy to jump. Damn it. I should have known it was too good to be true. Don't beat yourself up, Cindy said, her voice firm. These people are professional manipulators. The important thing is, we caught on before it was too late. I looked up at her. What do you mean, before it was too late? Cindy sat down across from me, her expression serious. Simon has been recording your conversations, Benjamin, twisting your words to make you look unstable, volatile. Chad was planning to release the tapes, use them to further smear your name. My blood ran cold. So what do we do now? Cindy leaned back, a determined glint in her eye. We turn the tables on them. Use their own tactics against them. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We need to expose them publicly, Cindy explained. Show the world their true nature. And I think I know how we can do it. She outlined her plan. and I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. It was risky, but if it worked, "Are you sure about this?" I asked. I immediately regretted the words as they left my mouth. Of course Cindy was sure. She'd been my rock through this whole ordeal, never wavering in her support or her determination to see justice done. Cindy's eyes flashed with a fierce intensity. Absolutely. Benjamin, these people have ruined lives, manipulated everyone around them. It's time we showed the world who they really are. I nodded. You're right. Let's do it. What's the next step? We need Christy, Cindy said. She's our key to luring Chad into a trap, but it won't be easy for her. Are you okay with bringing her into this? I thought about Christy, about the pain in her eyes when she talked about Chad. Let's ask her. She deserves the chance to fight back. We called Christy, putting her on speakerphone. As Cindy outlined the plan, I could hear the mix of fear and determination in Christy's voice. It's risky, Christy said after Cindy finished. If Chad realizes what we're doing, we'll protect you, I interjected. Christy, you don't have to do this if you're not comfortable. There was a pause, then Christy's voice came through, stronger than before. No, I want to do this. I need to do this. For myself, and for all the others they've hurt. As we hammered out the details, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, our chance to turn the tables, to expose Hazel and Chad for who they truly were. Remember, Cindy said as we wrapped up the call, timing is everything. We need to catch them off guard, give them no chance to spin this. I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. What about Simon? Should we confront him? Cindy shook her head. Not yet. Let him think he's still in control. We'll deal with him when the time is right. As I left Cindy's office, my phone buzzed. A text from Chad. Having fun playing detective, Benny? Better be careful. You never know who might be watching. I smiled. Chad thought he was so clever, always one step ahead. But not this time. This time, we were going to beat him at his own game. Over the next few days, we put our plan into motion. Christy reached out to Chad, playing the part of the regretful ex desperate for another chance. I had to admit, she was good. Even knowing it was an act, I found myself almost believing her pleas. Chad, predictably, took the bait. A fundraiser for his political campaign was coming up, and he invited Christy to attend. It was the perfect opportunity. The night of the fundraiser, I paced nervously in a hotel room across the street from the venue. Cindy sat at a makeshift command center, coordinating with Marcos and our tech team. Christy's in position. Marcos's voice came through the speakers. Chad's already approached her. Looks like he's taking the bait. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to rush across the street and confront Chad myself. Is the audio feed clear? Cindy nodded, her eyes glued to the monitors. Crystal clear. Every word Chad says is being recorded. As we listened, Chad's true nature began to reveal itself. His condescending remarks about the public, his plans to use Christy as a pawn in his political game, even some disparaging comments about Hazel. It was all there, caught on tape. This is gold, Cindy murmured. But we need more. We need him to incriminate himself fully. Just then, Marcos's voice crackled through again. Heads up. Hazel just arrived. She looks pissed. I leaned in, my heart racing. This was the moment of truth. If Hazel lost her cool, if she and Chad turned on each other, we didn't have to wait long. Hazel's shrill voice cut through the background chatter of the fundraiser. What the hell is she doing here? Hazel demanded, loud enough for our mics to pick up clearly. Chad's response was low, but clear enough. Calm down, Hazel. She's just a means to an end. You know how the game is played. Game? Hazel's voice rose. Is that what this is to you? A game? As we listened, Hazel and Chad's facade began to crumble. They bickered, each trying to assert dominance over the other, forgetting about the crowded room around them. Now, Cindy said, her voice tense, Christy needs to confront them now, while they're off balance. I grabbed the secure phone we'd given Christy, sending a pre-arranged signal. Moments later, Christy's voice cut through the chaos. Is this what you do, Chad? Use people until they're no longer useful? And you, Hazel, you're no better. How many lives have you two ruined for your own selfish gains? The room fell silent. I could picture the scene. Christy standing tall, Chad and Hazel caught off guard, the political bigwigs watching in shock. I think it's time we showed everyone who you really are, Christy continued, her voice strong. That was my cue. I nodded to Cindy, who hit a button on her laptop. Instantly, the evidence we'd gathered, financial records, testimonies, the recorded conversations from tonight began broadcasting on every screen in the venue. It's done, Cindy said, a note of awe in her voice. Benjamin, we did it. I stared at the monitors, watching as Chad and Hazel's carefully constructed world came crashing down around them. Part of me expected to feel elated, triumphant, but all I felt was a satisfaction. Come on, I said, standing up. Let's go face them. As we crossed the street to the venue, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. This wasn't just about my personal vendetta anymore. It was about justice, about protecting others from falling victim to Hazel and Chad's manipulations. The night of Chad's fundraiser arrived, and I felt a mix of anticipation and dread as I adjusted my earpiece in the hotel room across the street. Cindy sat at the makeshift command center, her eyes glued to the monitors showing various camera feeds from inside the venue. Christy's in position, Marcos's voice crackled through our comms. Chad's just entered the main hall. I leaned forward, watching the screens intently. How's she holding up? Like a pro, Cindy replied, admiration in her voice. You'd never know she was nervous. We watched as Christy made her way through the crowd, her movements calculated to catch Chad's eye. It didn't take long. Well, Chad's voice came through crystal clear on our audio feed. Christy, I didn't expect to see you here. Christy's reply was pitch perfect, her voice trembling just enough to sound vulnerable. Chad, I needed to see you. To talk. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to rush over there and confront him myself. But I knew we had to stick to the plan. She's got him hooked, Marcos commented. He's leading her to a quieter corner. For the next hour, we listened as Chad fell deeper into our trap. His mask slipped more and more as he grew comfortable, revealing his true nature. These people, Chad scoffed, gesturing to the crowd of supporters. They're all just pawns, Christy. Means to an end. But you and we're different. We understand how the game is really played. Christy played her part perfectly, drawing him out. And what game is that, Chad? His laugh was cold. Power, of course. These fools think they're electing a leader. What they don't realize is that I'm molding them, shaping their very thoughts. By the time I'm done, they'll be begging me to take control. I exchanged a glance with Cindy. This was even better than we'd hoped. Suddenly, Marcos's voice cut in urgently. Heads up. Hazel just arrived, and she does not look happy. We watched as Hazel stormed through the crowd, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Chad and Christy. What the hell is this? Hazel's shrill voice carried clearly through our audio. Chad, what is she doing here? Chad's tone changed instantly, becoming placating. Hazel, sweetheart, calm down. This isn't what it looks like. Oh, really? Hazel sneered. Because it looks like you're cozying up to your ex at your own fundraiser. Did you forget who got you here, Chad? The argument escalated quickly, with Chad and Hazel trading accusations and revealing more of their manipulative nature with each passing moment. Now, I said to Cindy, it's time. Cindy nodded, pressing a button on her laptop. Instantly, every screen in the venue lit up with the evidence we'd gathered. Financial records, testimonies from other victims, and footage of Chad and Hazel's own incriminating words from tonight. Through the cameras, we watched as the room fell into chaos. Supporters gasped, journalists scrambled for their phones, and in the center of it all, Chad and Hazel stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and rage. Let's go, I said, standing up. Time to face the music. As we crossed the street to the venue, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. This was it, the moment we'd been working towards for weeks. We entered the hall to find it in uproar. Chad was at the podium, desperately trying to regain control of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, please, he was saying, his voice strained. This is clearly a malicious attack by my political opponents. I assure you, none of this is true. Really, Chad? I called out, my voice carrying across the room. Are you sure about that? The crowd parted as I walked forward. Cindy, Christy, and Marcos flanking me. Chad's face drained of color as he saw us. You, he snarled. You did this. I smiled coldly. No, Chad. You did this. You and Hazel. We just exposed the truth. Hazel pushed her way to the front, her eyes wild. You bastard, she spat at me. You think you can ruin us? Do you have any idea who we are? Who we know? I know exactly who you are, I replied, my voice steady. You're manipulators. Users. People who destroy lives for your own gain. And now, everyone else knows it too. The room had fallen silent, all eyes on us. I turned to address the crowd. You've all seen the evidence, I said. The records of their manipulation, the testimonies of those they've hurt. This isn't about politics. It's not about a scorned husband or a jilted ex. It's about exposing two people who have spent years using and discarding others for their own benefit. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see the doubt in their eyes, the dawning realization. Chad made one last desperate attempt. You can't believe him, he pleaded with the crowd. He's unstable, he's… Enough. The shout came from an unexpected source. Lawrence, my old friend, pushed his way to the front. I've known Benjamin for years. He's a good man. And after what I've seen tonight, I believe him. More voices joined in, people stepping forward to share their own experiences with Chad and Hazel's manipulation. As the tide turned against them, I watched Chad and Hazel's facades crumble completely. They turned on each other, each trying to shift the blame. This was all her idea, Chad yelled, pointing at Hazel. She's the one who pushed me into politics, who came up with all these schemes. Hazel laughed bitterly. Oh, please. You were manipulating people long before you met me, Chad. I just refined your technique. Their argument devolved into a shouting match, airing years of dirty laundry in front of the stunned crowd. As security moved in to escort Chad and Hazel out, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Cindy, her eyes shining with pride. We did it, she said softly. It's over. I nodded, watching as Chad and Hazel were led away, still hurling accusations at each other. It was over. But somehow, I knew this was just the beginning. The aftermath of the fundraiser was a whirlwind. Reporters swarmed us as we left the venue, shouting questions and thrusting microphones in our faces. Mr. Hubbard, how long have you been planning this expose? Ms. Taylor, as Chad McMillan's ex-fiancée, what can you tell us about his manipulative behavior? Cindy stepped forward, her lawyer mode fully engaged. We'll be holding a press conference tomorrow morning to address all your questions. For now, we ask for privacy as we process these events. As we pushed through the crowd, I caught sight of Chad and Hazel being led to separate police cars. Their eyes met mine, and I saw a mixture of fury and defeat in their expressions. Back at the hotel, our team gathered to debrief. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. I can't believe we actually pulled it off, Christy said, slumping into a chair. Did you see their faces when the evidence started playing? Marcos grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. You did good, kid. Real good. I shook my head. We all did. This was a team effort. Cindy was already on her laptop, monitoring the fallout online. It's blowing up, she reported. Every major news outlet is covering it. Chad's political career is over. And Hazel? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice was. Cindy's expression softened slightly. Social media is tearing her apart. Her reputation? Well, let's just say she won't be manipulating anyone else anytime soon. I nodded. Part of me had expected to feel triumphant, elated. But all I felt was a satisfaction and a deep weariness. Benjamin? Christy's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Are you okay? I managed a small smile. Yeah, just processing, I guess. Cindy stood up, her expression determined. Well, don't process too much tonight. We've got a big day tomorrow. That press conference is our chance to control the narrative, to make sure everyone understands exactly what Chad and Hazel did. As the others discussed strategy for the press conference, I stepped out onto the balcony, needing a moment alone. The city sprawled out before me, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Chad and Hazel were facing the consequences of their actions. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Benjamin. You have no idea what you've started." I deleted the message without responding. They were desperate, lashing out, but their threats held no power over me anymore. The next morning, we gathered in front of a sea of reporters. Camera flashes popped as Cindy stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning," she began. "We're here to address the events of last night and to provide context for the evidence presented against Chad McMillan and Hazel Hubbard." For the next hour, we laid out our case. Christy shared her story of manipulation and emotional abuse. Marcos presented the financial evidence of Chad and Hazel's schemes. And I told the truth about my marriage, about the betrayal, about the months of gaslighting and manipulation that followed. As I spoke, I could see the shock and sympathy on the reporters' faces, but I didn't want their pity. I wanted justice. "This isn't just about me," I concluded. "It's about every person Chad and Hazel have used and discarded. It's about holding manipulators accountable, no matter how charming or powerful they might seem." The questions came fast and furious after that. We fielded them as best we could, sticking to the facts and avoiding speculation about Chad and Hazel's futures. As the press conference wound down, a commotion at the back of the room caught my attention. Chad, looking disheveled and wild-eyed, pushed his way to the front. "You think this is over?" he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "You've ruined everything. I'll destroy you for this, Benjamin. I swear I'll." Security guards grabbed Chad, dragging him away as he continued to shout threats. The room erupted into chaos, reporters shouting questions and cameras flashing. Cindy quickly took control, her voice cutting through the din. "As you can see, Mr. McMillan is clearly unstable. We have no further comments at this time. Thank you all for coming." Relief that it was over, satisfaction at seeing Chad unravel, but also a lingering sense of unease. This chapter of my life was closing, but what would the next one bring? Cindy squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You did great out there. How are you holding up?" I managed a small smile. "I'm okay. It's just a lot to process." She nodded understanding. "I know, but remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here for you." As we left the building, I caught sight of my reflection in a window. The man staring back at me looked older, harder, but also stronger. I'd been through hell, but I'd come out the other side. Chad and Hazel had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they'd only succeeded in making me stronger. And now, finally, they were the ones facing destruction. The war was over, and against all odds, we had won. Months passed, and slowly, life began to return to a new kind of normal. The media frenzy died down, Chad and Hazel faded from the headlines, and I found myself facing an unexpected challenge, figuring out who I was now that the fight was over. The day I returned to teaching was surreal. As I walked through the school gates, I braced myself for whispers and stares. Instead, I was met with a wave of support. "Mr. Hubbard." A group of students rushed up to me. "We're so glad you're back." My colleague, Sarah, approached with a warm smile. "Welcome back, Benjamin. We've missed you around here." As I settled back into my classroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. This was where I belonged. Not in courtrooms or press conferences, but here, making a difference in my students' lives. During my first class, a student raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Hubbard? We saw what happened on the news. How did you find the strength to stand up to those people?" I paused, considering my answer carefully. "It wasn't easy," I admitted, "but sometimes doing the right thing means facing your fears and standing up for the truth, no matter how hard it might be." The students nodded, and I could see the impact of my words in their eyes. Maybe some good could come from all this pain after all. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, I began to feel like myself again. One Saturday evening, I found myself hosting a small gathering at my apartment. Cindy, Marcos, Christy, and even Lawrence were there, the unlikely team that had become my strongest support system. As we sat around my living room, sharing pizza and swapping stories, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. "I propose a toast," Lawrence said, raising his glass, "to Benjamin, the bravest, most stubborn son of a gun I've ever met." Everyone laughed, clinking glasses. Seriously, though, Lawrence continued, his expression sobering. I owe you an apology, Ben. I should have believed you from the start. I let Chad fool me, and I'll always regret that. I shook my head. You've more than made up for it, Lawrence. Having you stand up for me at the fundraiser, it meant a lot. Christy chimed in, her eyes shining. I think we all owe Benjamin our thanks. Without him, who knows how many more lives Chad and Hazel would have destroyed. Hey now, I protested, feeling my cheeks warm. This was a team effort. I couldn't have done any of it without all of you. Cindy caught my eye, a soft smile on her face. Maybe, but you were the one brave enough to take the first step, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. As the night wore on and our friends began to leave, Cindy lingered. We found ourselves on my small balcony, looking out over the city. So, Cindy said, breaking the comfortable silence, what's next for Benjamin Hubbard? I chuckled. Honestly, I have no idea. For so long, my whole life was focused on exposing Chad and Hazel. Now that it's over, I'm not sure what comes next. Cindy turned to face me, her expression serious. Whatever it is, I hope you know you don't have to face it alone. Our eyes met, and I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with anxiety or fear. For the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future. The next week, I found myself back at the community center, standing in front of the Healing Hearts support group. But this time, I wasn't there as a participant. I'd like to welcome our guest speaker, Laverne said, smiling warmly at me. Benjamin Hubbard has a unique perspective to share with us today. I took a deep breath and began to speak. A few months ago, I sat where you're sitting now, I said, betrayed, angry, feeling like my whole world had fallen apart. I thought I'd never be whole again. I paused, looking around the room. But I was wrong. What I went through, it was horrible. But it also showed me how strong I could be. It showed me who my true friends were. And most importantly, it showed me that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth fighting for. As I shared my story, I could see the impact it was having. People who had come in looking defeated began to sit up straighter, a spark of determination in their eyes. You are not defined by what was done to you, I concluded. You are defined by how you choose to move forward. Trust your instincts. Stand up for yourself. And never, ever let anyone make you doubt your own worth. The applause as I finished was thunderous. People came up to me afterwards, sharing their own stories, thanking me for giving them hope. As I left the community center, I felt lighter than I had in months. The pain of what Hazel and Chad had done would always be a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I walked out into the crisp evening air, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. As I reached my car, I saw a familiar figure leaning against it. Cindy? I said, surprised. What are you doing here? She smiled, a mix of warmth and something else in her eyes. I thought you might want to celebrate. Your first motivational speech and all. I chuckled, shaking my head. I don't know if I'd call it motivational. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the most motivational thing of all, Cindy replied. She paused, then added, I'm proud of you, Benjamin. You've come a long way. We stood there for a moment, the air between us charged with unspoken possibilities. Finally, I broke the silence. You know, I am feeling pretty good. Dinner? Cindy's smile widened. I thought you'd never ask. As we drove to a nearby restaurant, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal, the pain, the fight. It all seemed like a lifetime ago. Over dinner, Cindy and I talked about everything and nothing. Work, books, dreams for the future. It felt easy, natural, in a way things hadn't felt in years. You know, Cindy said as we finished our meal, when I first offered to represent you, I never imagined we'd end up here. I raised an eyebrow. Having dinner? She laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. No, you goof. I mean here. You, whole again. Maybe even happier than before. I considered her words. I don't know if I'm happier, but I'm stronger. I know who I am now, in a way I never did before. Cindy reached across the table, taking my hand. And who is that? I met her gaze, feeling more certain than I had in months. Someone who doesn't let others define him. Someone who fights for what's right, no matter the cost. And someone who's ready to see where this new chapter of life might lead. As we left the restaurant, walking close together in the cool night air, I felt a sense of anticipation. Not anxiety or fear, but excitement for what the future might hold. "So," Cindy said as we reached her car, "what's next for Benjamin Hubbard?" I smiled, thinking of my students, my friends, the people at the support group whose lives I might be able to touch. And of course, the woman standing in front of me, who had stood by me through the darkest times and was now here to share in the light. "I'm not sure," I replied honestly, "but for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to finding out." Cindy's eyes sparkled. "Well, whatever it is, I hope I'm around to see it." "I hope so too," I said softly. As we stood there, the city bustling around us, I felt the last traces of bitterness and anger melt away. Hazel and Chad had tried to destroy me, but they had failed. Instead, they had forced me to become stronger, to discover parts of myself I never knew existed. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. Not as a victim, not as a scorned husband, but as a man who had been through fire and come out stronger on the other side. I leaned in, closing the distance between Cindy and me. As our lips met, I felt a spark of something new, something full of promise and possibility. The past was behind me. The future, with all its unknowns, lay ahead. And for the first time in years, I was truly, genuinely excited to see what it would bring. As Cindy and I parted, both a little breathless, she grinned up at me. "You know, counselor-client relationships are generally frowned upon." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Good thing the case is closed then, isn't it?" She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Very good thing indeed." As we said our goodnights and I watched Cindy drive away, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead might not be easy, but I was ready for whatever challenges it might bring. I turned and walked towards my apartment, my steps sure and steady. The man who had stood in front of the mirror on that fateful wedding day felt like a stranger now. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more prepared for whatever life might throw at him. The stars twinkled overhead as I made my way home, a quiet reminder that even after the darkest nights, light always returns. And as I unlocked my door and stepped inside, I knew that this wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.